Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. I'm still not, at least yet, doing my full takedown of Pierre Poilievre and the slimy little shit weasel that he is. But what we are going to do today is talk about how he's very likely to win not only the Conservative leadership, but the next election based on an ad of his. Now, I'm not going to show the ad because he doesn't need enough attention on him, but the core of it is he very rightly points out how ridiculous housing prices are in Vancouver. However, his solution is one that I've pointed out before is just absolutely terrible and nonsensical, and it really betrays a key part of his view and how very politically savvy he is. But rather than rehash that same idea that I've said before, let's take a little journey down memory lane about how I've been talking about this for over a goddamn year now. And it seems like nothing's getting better, and I'm kind of just calling things. And unfortunately, here we are with nothing better to show for it. So first we're going to see that, and I swear I'm going to have a point to all this. There is an article from the Globe and Mail that should be ringing alarm bells for everyone, and one would hope that this would finally spur government action. But we have the Liberal Party, so nothing's probably going to happen. A 33-year-old buyer named Greg has an income of more than $200,000, and he and his partner or his wife were ready with a $450,000 down payment, and they have still not been able to successfully bid on homes, not in Toronto, but in the suburbs. They had been house shopping north of Toronto, especially around Markham, Stouffville, and Uxbridge. Google Uxbridge. It is, or you'd think it would be, a quaint little village outside the GTA, surrounded by farmland. Homes are apparently going for $1 million there now. This is the situation just in Toronto. These are people looking for homes in the suburbs. Not even the suburbs. Uxbridge is literally like a village outside and far away from everything. Markham is part of the GTA suburban landscape now. Okay, Uxbridge is not. And this is only just part of the problem. Talk to anyone born and raised in the lower mainland of BC. It's unaffordable. This thing, the Canadian Constitution, tells us that we have freedom of movement, and yet it seems people can't exercise that right these days. Not just because of the pandemic, but because of the unaffordability of many of Canada's largest cities. The most infamous are Toronto and Vancouver, but Montreal is getting more expensive for people. Ottawa now has routinely $1 million homes going within many of its neighborhoods, whether they're in the inner part of the city or not. I can't speak for Alberta. I don't know much about them, but I can only imagine that now things are probably getting just as bad. This is a problem where people with, again, that kind of money, that kind of annual income, and that much of a down payment saved up, nearly $500,000 saved up for a down payment, and they still have not been successful in buying a house because the bidding can just become too extreme. This is no longer a red hot market. This is the blinding surface of the sun. It's inhospitable. And this is something that lots of people are being faced with. And with the increasing urbanization of Canada and most other nations, we're not keeping up with actually giving enough space and time and resources so that those who wish and desire to move to the city for better economic opportunities actually have a place to stay that they can afford to stay in. Stuff like this should be completely unacceptable. An example from this article, shows that they decided to put in a bid on a home listed at $999,999. And that was 21% more than the asking price. And the house went for 35% over asking price. What is going on here? And who are the people who have this kind of disposable income to go over 35% of the seller's asking price? This is like going to a supermarket and saying, you know what? Instead of paying, let's say, $1 for an apple, I want to spend $1.35 just because. I just want to make it more expensive, and I really like apples. I'm going to corner the market on apples, and now these people can't afford apples anymore. And the reason why I bring this up is because this is kind of how, unfortunately, a lot of foods like quinoa and kale, because now a bunch of young professionals want them, it's making them unaffordable for the people who have traditionally harvested these crops, especially in Peru and Bolivia. But that's a subject for a different time. I'm here talking about the grotesque beast that is the housing market in Canada, and the complete lack of government effort to do anything to tamp down on it, because that would be bad for business. How bad is it that people like this, with that kind of disposable income and that kind of a down payment saved up, can't actually successfully buy a home? Never mind someone like me who makes way less than $200,000 a year. If people who are doing objectively way better than me financially are struggling to find a home, that's a problem. That is a crisis. And that is something that leadership should actually take on as a challenge and begin to address. There's two news stories out of Ottawa, the capital of Canada. So apparently, a while ago, on Friday, March 19th, an Ottawa couple bid $400,000 over the asking price of a home, and they lost. And the home is probably only worth like that amount of money anyway, but because the housing market is so hot right now, this is the kind of like bidding that people need to do, and they're still losing. This single family home in the Ottawa community of Riverside South sold for $1.25 million. This is a suburban, like a satellite suburban community of Ottawa. It is far, like in the countryside, and yet it's going for $1.25 million. It's not some like quaint old, farm estate. It's a home built not that many years ago, selling for $1.25 million, and people bidding $400,000 over the asking price couldn't secure a home. What even is real life? And we're getting to that. But then there's another really frustrating story from Ottawa that I learned of. Company behind Herongate Development rejects proposal to further help evictees. So the background behind this, there's an area in Ottawa called the Herongate neighborhood, and there's a lot of low income and community housing in this area. And apparently the property owners, they sold their land to some company, and then that company is now trying to revitalize the area, and they're showing a whole bunch of new like mid-rise and high-rise condo towers. But what's happened is that they have evicted a lot of these people. Apparently there was a mass eviction at one point like a year ago of 500 people all at once. A organization called Acorn, they asked the company as part of their proposal to make sure that 35% of new units in these developments will be affordable, so that these people who are kicked out can move back into their communities, go back to their schools, etc. The company isn't budging. So this would be a really great time to tell people about all the great work that Acorn does there in Ottawa and several other municipalities across this province. They do really good work at ensuring that tenants know their rights, and helping support people and low-income housing, and just trying to address the housing crisis in general. So if you're Canadian, please consider giving them your support. And if you're in Ottawa, Make some noise about this, because this is ridiculous and unacceptable for both of these stories. So recently, and under pressure, Ontario appointed 9 people as part of their new affordable housing task force. Premier Doug Ford says he has appointed 9 people to a task force assigned to address housing affordability in the province so that it's easier for more Ontarians to realize the dream of home ownership. You want to know who's leading this task force? The Housing Affordability Force will be chaired by Jake Lawrence, CEO and Group Head of Global Banking and Markets at Scotiabank, and will publish a report into its findings in early 2022, the government said. The task force will look into a number of ways Ontario can increase the supply of rental units, as well as homes for ownership. Here's some ideas. Maybe don't have an investment banker head the very thing that is currently being abused by investment bankers. Oh, and as an added kicker, 6 out of the 9 names on this new task force show up on Elections Ontario's political donations list, all contributed to the PC party within the last few years. I'm sure that's totally coincidental and totally fine, right? Reality is beyond parody at this point, I swear to Christ. Here's the thing, right? Right now, the majority of new buyers, 25% of all new homes being bought are being bought by investment firms like BlackRock or whoever, like a copycat version of them. And so what's happening is that people are buying homes at, bidding at ridiculously high prices as investments to deposit them into pension funds in the future. And so what this is doing is it is not only driving up the cost of housing, but also they're turning around and renting these houses out to people. So the mortgage is maybe only $1,400 a month, but they are charging $2,600 a month or more, depending on what the market will bear in whatever city in the province. And that is how they make a killing on the profit, and they buy up all the supply. So I have some solutions for the task force that they can implement any goddamn day. Option number 1, just ban the practice. Just outright ban it. Let people, not corporations, buy and bid in the marketplace. Option number 2, you can actually just say, hey, you know what? We need X amounts of affordable housing. So based on what's currently out in the marketplace, which by the way is more than enough fucking housing, we're just going to seize what we need, and in various areas, including, let's say, the areas under intense gentrification. Maybe we start with those. Those will be seized by the state, as it were, or the province, and that will then be used to create affordable housing. And then whatever's left of the supply, fucking go ham. There's your free market. Whatever's left over, have fun. Third option, we can copy what Quebec has done recently, which is actually allow cities like Montreal and I think also Gatineau, Quebec is also hopefully getting this in the future. You give municipalities the power for first right of refusal. This is basically something that they're using in Montreal to basically indicate where they want to potentially buy or build affordable housing in a certain area off of like someone's property. So, hey, we see you own this apartment block here. Mind if we buy it off you? Or, hey, here's an empty parcel of land. Mind if we buy it off you to build some affordable housing? We'll pay a market rate for it. It allows cities, or just municipalities in general, to identify what they want to actually, buy or invest in, or rather intensify, especially in an urban area. But they can set it aside specifically for at-cost development to create affordable housing. You could also maybe, petition the feds to get off their ass and actually let the funds meant for building affordable housing flow a lot more freely. I think we've touched on this before in a previous video somewhere. And, option like 5 or 6 or whatever, because there's a lot of options you can do. You don't even really need to explore much. Simply build it. Just start building it. Instead of giving new developments and new highways and new suburban like subdivisions and crap like that, just literally say, you know what? No, moratorium on that for a while. I need everyone in the construction industry to radically shift, and we're going to build a bunch of affordable housing for a while. Then when that's like set up and okay, that's going to cover all the needs for affordable housing, then you can go back to the suburban subdevelopments and condos and whatever the fuck else. So hi, please pay me that like ridiculous 6-figure sum that you're not going to pay these people to figure out some terrible, option, right? That's what's really bothering me about all this at the end of the day. Not only the fact that the leader is an investment banker, so that's spelling disaster already, folks. The other part of this is that of all those various options that I listed, some of which could appeal more to certain demographics than others, but they're all different options, right? You don't even need to do just one and none of the others. You could take a mixed bag approach, expropriate some property while building some new stuff. You can just do so much more. And yet here we are sitting with, oh, look, we're starting a task force. Isn't it going to be so great? They're going to take a long time to actually come up with some kind of objectively terrible result, which is, well, and God, I hate putting this out into the universe, but I swear to Christ, it's probably going to happen. Their solution for affordable housing is we're going to come up with yet another P3, public-private partnership to work with big business so that we can get around all this red tape, right? It's the free market, baby. And we're going to just be able to really quickly build a bunch of affordable housing. And it's going to be shit quality. And it's going to look terrible. And it's going to fall apart in a matter of fucking years. But the government will celebrate it and uphold it as, oh, look, see, capitalism, so great. And we're so great for getting this done super quick. And people are going to suffer. Do some of y'all remember how back on December 6th, I pointed out the various problems with Doug Ford's affordable housing task force that was being led predominantly by PC donors and also a CEO from Scotiabank, and how I said, yeah, it's probably not going to be anything really good, and we're going to get just the terrible results. And and so what I need people to be aware of now are the results of the Housing Affordability Task Force. That's right, it's all here now. So what does it say? The task force report recommendations include 5 main areas to quickly increase the supply of market housing to meet a goal of adding 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. 1. Make changes to planning policies and zoning to allow for greater density and increase the variety of housing. 2. Reduce and streamline urban design rules to lower costs of development. 3. Depoliticize the approvals process to address NIMBYism and cut red tape to speed up housing. 4. Prevent abuse of the appeal process and address the backlog at the Ontario Land Tribunal by prioritizing cases that increase housing. Number 5. Align efforts between all levels of government to incentivize more housing. Additionally, the task force's report makes other recommendations to increase housing supply over the long term, including to digitize and modernize the approvals and planning process, grow the skilled labor workforce, and encourage new pathways to home ownership. So in other words, yeah, I kind of just called it, but also let's kind of break down what they're actually saying across the board with these points. What they're saying is the citizens fighting back is too difficult. It's causing too much red tape, and we just need to get this done, so we're going to cut through the red tape so that we can just build more housing. It's not about affordable housing, right? The Affordable Housing Task Force came to the realization that prices are so high because there's such a small housing supply. There really isn't. There's more than enough vacant homes to house every single person in this country and then some. But I digress. They decided that the best solution was we got to make it easier to build even more housing, because if there's if there's just a higher volume, then the prices will naturally drop, right? It completely ignores the fact that the banks are the ones exploiting the current system and just making massive bids, and the banks are bankrolling this because, oh look, the companies like BlackRock and whoever, the banks just fund those mortgages, which seem to be very good securities that make up pensions. So the banks are making just a ton of free money, basically. So they have no incentive to clamp down on that. I wonder why the Affordable Housing Task Force was led by a former banker. Really puzzles the mind, that one. And then on top of that, right, you have them saying, well, we build more houses and that means price go down, right? It completely ignores what's currently happening in the market. And then there's that last point there, right? When they say, we're going to make it so that there are more avenues for people to buy homes, right? It's just opening up more liquidity. And so the solution is just steamroll over neighborhoods and cities and just, what we say goes, and streamline the process to make it more online for, all the big businesses to just push that stuff through. And never mind actually making affordable housing. They just want to increase the supply of housing, whether it's, condos or suburban subdevelopments or whatever, because somehow magically that means the price will go down. Please ignore the fact that we are profiting immensely off of the current system where they are the ones doing most of the bidding and just holding the house as an asset rather than, letting people live in it. So yeah, I'm really not surprised by this development, but it is still so unfortunate that this is just so stupid and mask off, right? That these people are just saying, yeah, this will work, right? And they were all led by people who, again, donate to the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario, one of whom is a former fucking banker, for God's sake. Like, this whole situation is so stupid and avoidable, and it's one of those things where it's not actually addressing the problem, right? The Affordable Housing Task Force came up with, unfortunately, as I predicted, some of the worst ideas and then some, as gravy on top. It is just so unfortunate, and it misses the entire point of building affordable housing. Oh, we'll just get more people in the workforce. Yeah, what's the detailed plan? Notice how they don't mention that, because that's not what this is about. It's just about putting out more housing units for banks to bankroll so that more of their friends in the real estate sector can make even more money to donate to their campaigns, and they just enrich themselves further. And so eventually, 10 years from now, this country will be swimming in housing in terms of just the sheer number of units, but there will still be people unable to afford them because the affordable housing crisis, they don't want to actually address that. They only see profit and capital. They don't see people who are suffering and need places to stay. And the kicker is that each of these people was paid like a 6-figure salary to give this report that is basically only serving to enrich themselves and their friends. And so here we are, back in the present, and unfortunately, Pierre Poilievre is doing the exact same thing, basically, that happened in Ontario with the Housing Affordability Task Force. He rightly points out that this is something that is very concerning to a lot of Canadians. Case in point, you saw me bring this up in March of last year. So he accurately points that out. But what he does is very conservative and very politically savvy. He talks about how, it's, the fault of government and, it's all about the banks and big government. We just you need to get rid of the regulations and the crippling bureaucracy, and that will allow the supply to just flourish, and that means automatically bringing down demand. But that's not how this shit fucking works anymore. The housing market is no longer a bunch of individuals who have saved up, like several $1,000s over the course of their young adult professional lives and gotten a loan from a bank that says, yeah, that checks out, and then gone and bid, a couple thousand or, $10,000+ over asking price for a house. That's not how this is anymore. And each and every single one of these terrible neoliberal nightmare governments, whether it's Doug Ford in Ontario or the municipal government in Vancouver, or just like the federal aspect of it, if you want to call it that, in terms of, we're going to build 10,000 new affordable housing units when we need like 120,000. Like, it's ridiculous, right? So all these people are to blame, right? The problem is that just lifting the supply cap, that doesn't change the fact that the majority of buyers now are wealthy investment firms. That's why the cost of housing has skyrocketed. That's why that Greg dude, despite having a 7-figure salary and having $450,000 goddamn dollars as a down payment, never mind the mortgage, he has that ready as a down payment. He can't get a house because he is being outbid by big corporations like BlackRock. So that's the problem here. Lifting the supply, all that's going to do, and I'm willing to bet money on that right here, right now. All that will do, if, people listen to and believe what Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre are saying, all that is going to happen is that these same investment companies are going to buy up more and more of the supply, which is going to look really good for their, quarterly numbers. And then the government's going to turn around and say, but look, the economy is doing so well and the housing market is on fire. Now's a great time to get in. Never mind the fact that the housing market doesn't really fucking exist anymore. It's a plaything of investment companies and banks. We saw this before in 2008, and in the wake of that nightmare, they just started buying up all the foreclosed homes and renting them out, whether they were single family or otherwise. So now we get to the unfortunate, grim reality that Pierre, Doug, and everyone else are leading us to because they keep skirting around the fucking issue. Whether they're conservative or liberal, they want to protect the people who donate to them, which includes these companies, banks, businesses, etc., that are tied and involved with the real estate market. That is the source of the problem here. Getting rid of bureaucracy so that more can be built while the cities continue to have to pay for that extra infrastructure with suburban sprawl, because that's really mostly what they're talking about here. Never mind also the increased lumber costs and emissions, etc. associated with that, because we don't make the necessary investments in public transit, etc. So just building more of a supply only gives these already wealthy jackasses more opportunity to buy. It doesn't address the core problem. That whole, we're going to, put a pause on foreign buying for 2 years. It's a domestic problem, and it doesn't actually stop foreign buyers from just setting up a dummy shell corporation saying, no, see, that's totally domestic now. You think they're going to actually challenge them on that? Of course not, because this is all about money, which is why someone, whether it's the NDP or the Green Party or like a new party, basically, whichever party actually has a meaningful solution to this crisis will win the next election. All you need to say to actually win people to your side is, hey, the housing market is screwed up because of these people and this industry making a shitzillion dollars, and they're just being extremely greedy because they've bought up most of the current supply. Because of capitalism, you need to have more supply. Line must always go up, right? So that's why they're pushing for, if we just increase the supply, that will solve the problem. Really, it's a roundabout way of them saying that they want more opportunity to buy more houses, and we are going to get nothing. Which is why a party has to actually say that these are the people that are causing the problem, here's how they're causing the problem, and then how we fix that. You can fix it in several ways, which again, I kind of brought up earlier in the video. But to reiterate, you can actually just seize current housing, and in order to, make them not cry into their champagne glasses, you then just pay the actual cost of like the materials and labor that built the house or the skyscraper or whatever it was. So they're not making money, but they didn't lose money either, right? Because, think of the poor billionaires. That would then create enough of a housing supply that, you seize that, give it to people, and then whatever's left, yeah, sure, fine. Have that be your free little fucking market. Bid, $1 million over the asking price of a house. There you go. That's your new investment. That is one such solution. Another solution is to, cap and control prices. The thing that governments can and should do on occasion when it's in the interest of the people that they claim to represent and support. People like Pierre and like Doug. And that's what pisses me off about all of this, right? Seemingly no one is talking about this. No single party, whether they're nominally left or right, is talking about this and correctly pointing the finger at those responsible. And unfortunately, people like Pierre are likely going to win power when, unfortunately, people are desperate for that, right? People want that opportunity to actually get a house because they are seeing how terrible the world is, how terrible the housing market is. They want some kind of safety, security, and equity, right? That is completely understandable. But Pierre is dangling a false promise. he's saying, oh, well, we're like, he correctly points out why it's a problem. And he touches on that anger and that fear that a lot of people are understandably having. But he's not meaningfully addressing the problem when you simply are saying, oh, well, we're just going to, increase the supply. And that will, that means that there's going to be a drop in housing prices. No, there won't be. I'm willing to put money on it right now if that situation comes to pass. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going to vote for him, if only on that one issue. But really what they need to do is they need to, see the bigger picture and why Pierre's not going to solve it. And Doug is not going to solve it. And Justin Trudeau and his sycophants are not going to solve it. When are we going to wake up and realize the problem? Who's to blame? And meaningfully address it. And if we see that political parties are not going to meaningfully address it, then we need to ensure that those people never get into power again. But unfortunately, they are going to get into power again. And nothing will have fundamentally changed. And in, 2, 3, 5+ years from now, the situation will be worse, despite numerous platitudes by a variety of different levels of governments, whether they're Team Red or Team Blue, that will have said, we hear you, we want to address the problem. And nothing will have fundamentally changed. And the fact that I can say this with confidence is extremely depressing, and it's definitely what's bothering me today.